Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Suzanne Welbury, Vice Chairman of this committee, and tonight I am acting as Chairman. Before we start the meeting, I need to run through a few housekeeping details. Please be advised that this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, recorded, and will be transcribed for the official record. By remaining in the room, you consent to being included in the recording and transcript. When addressing this meeting, please ensure that you do so through the microphone system at all times. Speak clearly and directly so everyone in the room, remote participants and recordings can hear you. Mobile phones should be turned off or switched to silent mode. Restroom facilities are available for ladies on this floor and halfway down the main stairwell for gentlemen. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, officers will escort everybody out the building to the nearest fire safety point in the car park. Members of the public are free to leave the meeting at any time. Please raise your hand if you wish to leave, and please be patient whilst a member of security comes to collect you. Finally, please be advised that abuse or intimidation of any kind will not be tolerated. Any disturbance will result in the meeting being adjourned. Anyone who is deemed to breach these requirements will be warned and asked to refrain. And if the behaviour persists, they will be required to leave the meeting. Now we move to part one of the agenda, the preliminaries. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from councillors Anton Danny, Emma Cresswell, Lena Savikian, Patsy Marson, Barry Pierpoint and Paul Gleeson, who is being substituted by councillor Alison Austin.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any interest in respect of any items on the agenda? I will just say that I'm a member of PSPS. Councillor Pryke?
I'm declaring my membership of PSPS and of Black Sluice IDB.
Thank you. Councillor Scoot?
Thank you, Chair. I'm also declaring that I sit on the board of Black Sluice.
Councillor Austin? Yes, I'm also on the board of the Black Sluice. Thank you. Minutes. Do I have permission to sign the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 10th of February 2026? Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the public received 2 clear working days prior to this meeting?
There are none for this meeting, Chair.
Thank you. Part 2, agenda items. Section 19, Flooding Investigation Report, Wibberton West Road, Park Road, Boston. Our first item of business this morning is the Section 19, Flooding Investigation Report, Wibberton West Road, Park Road, Boston, as just declared. This starts on page 11 of the agenda. Our guests tonight are Matthew Harrison, Flood and Water Manager, Lincolnshire County Council. Hello. Morgan Ray, Area Flood Risk Manager, Environmental Agency. Hello. Daniel Withnell, Chief Executive, Black Sluice Internal Drainage Board. Hello. And Steve Eason Harris, Emergency Planning and Business Continuity Officer, with Kim Pickett, Community Resilience Officer, both from Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Emergency Planning and Business Continuity Service. Thank you all. The Service Director Regulatory, Christian Allen, is also in attendance. Hello. Christian, would you like to start by presenting the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a very short introduction, because the main purpose of this evening is presentations from colleagues that are attending from the risk management authorities. Just by way of sort of context, members will recall that in January 2025, there was flooding to Boston in the early hours of the morning on the 6th of January. which resulted in 38 residential properties on Wibberton West Road and Park Road, Boston, being internally flooded. There was a significant multi-agency response to that, and the recovery effort that followed. Where properties are flooded internally, Lincolnshire County Council, in their role as lead local flood authority, undertake what's called a Section 19 flooding investigation. That was completed last summer, and the report itself was presented to this committee on the 30th of July. And at that committee meeting, members asked that the risk management authorities attend another meeting of this committee to set out to you how they're responding, or how they intend to respond, or how they have responded to the Section 19 flooding report. So the representatives are here this evening. So without further ado, because I know you're very keen to understand what's happened since that flooding event last January. So without further ado, I'll hand over first of all to Matthew, and then Matthew's going to be followed by Morgan and then Daniel, and then I'll ask Steve whether he wants to add anything. If you could reserve your questions to the end, if that's okay, and allow the gentlemen to complete their presentations, there'll be more than enough time for questions from the committee. Thank you, and I'll hand over to Matthew.
Thank you, Christian, and good evening, everybody. So just to recap, I'm Matthew Harrison. I'm Flood and Water Manager at Lincolnshire County Council, so head up the Floods and Water team, which is responsible for instigating the Section 19 investigations that we've talked about. So I was asked to come along this evening just to give a little bit of a brief overview of our role at Lincolnshire County Council as lead local flood authority, the Section 19 process, and then obviously focusing a little bit then on what that has meant for Boston and the impacts to Boston, particularly with reference to January 2025. So just to set out at the beginning, Lincolnshire County Council is known as the lead local flood authority under the Flood and Water Management Act, which came into force in 2010. We have been recognised as lead local flood authority since 2012 and have taken on that role for local coordination of flood risk activities at a county level. The Environment Agency as an organisation have a national overview, and lead local flood authorities take on that more localised overview. So we have direct responsibility for managing flood risk linked to surface water, ordinary water courses and groundwater. The Environment Agency for main rivers and the coast, which are obviously relevant to this area as well. You'll see on the screen there that there's a number of bullet points that we have roles and responsibilities as a county council in our role as lead local flood authority. Part of that overview role is to develop and maintain a local flood risk management strategy, which sets out our objectives as a partnership of risk management authorities, that being Lincolnshire County Council, the Environment Agency, internal drainage boards, water companies, as well as Lincolnshire Resilience Forum. And we work collaboratively to prioritise across the county how we address flood risk issues that are faced. You'll see on the second bullet point there, one of those is that we carry out investigations into flooding and then publish the outcomes. That's one of the statutory requirements that we have, and that's what we call the Section 19 investigations, which we'll get into a little bit more detail. So Section 19, it's a phrase that's now quite commonly used because of the amount of reports and investigations that we've had to undertake into flooding across the county. So it's often commonly just referred to as an S19 or Section 19. It's actually Section 19 of the Flood and Water Management Act, which gives this information to us as a lead local flood authority, which is to identify which risk management authorities have relevant flood risk management functions and whether each of those have exercised or is proposing to exercise those functions in response to the flooding event. It explicitly says that the reports do not blame or hold any authority or individual to account, nor legally enforce any of the recommendations. In fact, under the Act, it doesn't actually stipulate that we have to make recommendations as a part of an investigation, but that's something that we've chosen to do locally in Lincolnshire, so we could be open and transparent amongst organisations as to what recommendations are being considered to try and mitigate the flooding that's occurred. But as I say, as an authority, we have that role as lead local flood authority, but under the Act, this gives us no powers to compel organisations to actually carry out work. They are merely recommendations that we recommend to be considered as in response to the flooding that has happened. So there's a number of criteria and trigger points that could involve us in undertaking a Section 19 investigation. Mainly, this is around property flooding, particularly internally property flooding. That's what will trigger a report where floodwater has entered the living space of a property. It doesn't include things like garages, outbuildings and gardens. We would record those details because it's valuable information, but we record that as a near miss. A formal investigation is triggered when water actually enters the living space of the property. There are other trigger points as well there that can instigate a report. But as I say, it's the risk to property and life and the damage that causes, which is our main priority. What I would say is that we may undertake an investigation when flooding has occurred. And part of that reason is that if we understand the mechanisms because of what it is, there is probably little value in carrying out an investigation for what we know already. The scale of the flooding that we've seen in recent years, we have actually carried out investigations for most instances of flooding to build that knowledge base of what has actually happened. So just to give some context, this shows the number of investigations, individual investigations that have been undertaken by ourselves since we became lead local flood authority in 2012. And as you can see, certainly since 2019, it shows a large increase in the number of investigations that have been undertaken. 2023 was Storm Babette, and again, nearly 200 reports produced there. And 2024 and 2025 also had major flooding events in the county. Put that into the context of what that means in the sense of property numbers. When we first started as lead local flood authority, as I say, in 2012, that was considered a bad year for flooding for us, and we didn't think we would see anything like it again. You only have to look at the chart there from 2019 onwards to see the scale of the impacts that flooding is now having across the county and on a more frequent basis as well. So between three major weather events in 2023, 24 and 25, we've had over 1,200 properties across the county directly impacted by flooding internally to the property, which has a huge impact on individuals. And whilst floodwaters can recede quite quickly, the lasting impacts of being affected by flooding do last for months and years beyond that for those who have been directly affected. So the impact is huge. The map here just shows the location of the Section 19 investigations undertaken following those three major weather events that we had in what was a relatively short space of time, and the impact. And as you can see, this was pretty much county-wide. All of the district areas in the county were affected in one way or another from those three events. To just bring that down into a bit more of a local level and more pertinent to this meeting, the Boston Borough area, relatively speaking, got away with it quite lightly from the impacts of some of those storms. But as you can see, not completely missed that. And January 2025, as Christian mentioned there in the introduction, there was certainly a cluster as a result of high water levels in the watercourses, and Wibberton West Road being particularly impacted from that. So certainly some impacts in the Boston Borough area. This here is a screenshot that is publicly available for people to look at via the web link that's on the top of the screen there. So this slide pack, I'm more than happy to be shared after the meeting, so it's available for people. And what we have to do as part of the Section 19 process is publish our findings. So on the Lincolnshire County Council website, you can follow that link, and then you can come to a screen which takes you to a search engine, and you can type in Boston, and then that will bring you the Section 19 information up for the Boston Borough area. So Section 19941 is the number that was allocated to the Section 19 investigation following the January 2025 flooding. And the screen there that you see is a screenshot of what is publicly available to view, with the description of flooding that was identified and the recommendations that have been made following that investigation that has been undertaken. And obviously, as we've said, we've got colleagues here this evening from Environment Agency, IDB and Lincolnshire Resilience Forum, and we'll be able to expand a little bit more on what some of those recommendations mean in a little while. One of the things that came out of the events of Storm Babette and Storm Henk in October 23 and January 2024 is that DEFRA, the government, announced a property flood resilience grant where property owners affected by flooding could apply for up to £5,000 of grant towards better protecting their homes. And property flood resilience measures can be things like flood barriers or flood doors or air brick covers that try and mitigate or stop the water getting into the property when flooding has happened. It won't stop the flooding, but what it does do is try and minimise any potential damage to the internal living space of the property. January 2025, because the scale of the flooding that was witnessed was to a lesser geographic extent as that experienced in Storm Babette and Storm Henk, the government didn't announce any support grant for properties that had been affected. However, recognising some of the benefits that we saw at Lincolnshire County Council by administering the national government grant, the members at the time, administration at the time, agreed to make £1 million available to try and support those people who had been, in the first instance, specifically affected by the flooding in January 2025. And of course, that would have included those residents who were affected in Boston, particularly around Wiverton West Road. As you can see there, the number of eligible properties for the grant from those people who had been directly affected by internal flooding were 40 people. We directly invited them to apply for the grant and offered them to work with us to apply for the grant. As you will see, of those 40, only 9 were forthcoming to take forward with the grant. That take up of property flood resilience measures, I think is fair to say, sort of reflected in other areas of the county as well. This isn't sort of just limited to Boston. And one of the pieces of work that we want to try and do now is better understand why people may not be wanting to take up these measures that will make them more resilient and better protected to flooding. So there's a piece of work there that we want to look at in the future. I think also, just for some context as well, particularly with the impacts of flooding, just to add that there was an event that took place in Boston this week, a Lincolnshire Flood Resilience and Mental Health Wellbeing Roadshow, which took place at the Eden Mayflower building. That was organised through Lincolnshire County Council as part of our Project Groundwater initiative, and it was run by a company called Shine, a mental health charity, who we've been working with. And there was various representatives there for the drop-in: Lincolnshire County Council, Internal Drainage Boards, Environment Agency, Fire and Rescue, Lincolnshire Resilience Forum, some insurance companies, and Shine themselves with the mental health and community support. And again, the event ran from, I think, 2 p.m. to, I wasn't there personally, but I know colleagues were, ran from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. And I think the footfall for that period was 17 people. So again, yeah, there's been some quite large impacts in Boston from flooding, but the interest is sometimes quite low when those offers of support are actually there and made available to people. So again, I think this is probably one of the things that we want to just try and understand why there isn't necessarily that take up for support when it is there and offered. The final slide that I was just going to present was, I've just touched on a Project Groundwater, which is a specific project within my team. We've got some government funding to better understand the impacts of groundwater, probably one of the least understood mechanisms of flooding that we face in Lincolnshire. And this isn't to resolve specific issues. This is to better understand the mechanisms of groundwater and the different impacts that has. One of the strands of that project is the option to install telemetry in watercourses, and this can be rolled out at a community level completely free of charge for a 10-year period. And this complements the Environment Agency flood warning service, but is more localised and bespoke to individuals. And you can have an app on your phone and get warnings of when water levels are rising, not just in Environment Agency main rivers, but surrounding watercourses as well. And a benefit of this system is that you can have access to information on adjoining watercourses that might be out of the area. So if watercourses are rising outside of the district, for example, but we have telemetry installed on those watercourses, you can have that advanced warning. So it's for people to be better prepared and better aware when we do have those extreme events and watercourses react to that. The reason for bringing this to your attention this evening is that the green marker points that you see on the screen there are where we have currently identified locations to install telemetry, but we are open to suggestions, and we really welcome local knowledge. If people think there are areas or better locations for them to be situated, do please get in touch with us, and we're more than happy to have a conversation, and we can look at taking that further. As I say, free to access, no charge to individuals at all. I will stop there. Thank you. More than happy to take questions in the broader Q&A session, but I'll now hand over to colleagues from other authorities who can provide some updates from their perspective.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Chair. Yes, my name's Morgan Ray. I'm the Area Flood and Coastal Risk Manager at the Environment Agency. Just a little bit about our organisation. So we're divided into 14 areas of jurisdiction. The area of jurisdiction that we cover is Lincolnshire and Northamptonshire. I'm the flood risk manager for largely the greater Lincolnshire part of that. So although actually rivers don't generally follow county boundaries, so I cover the South Humber and East Coast catchments together with the River Witham catchment area. So that's my area of jurisdiction. So as Matthew pointed out, we're responsible for managing flood risk from rivers and the sea. So they are main rivers. Main rivers are generally the larger watercourses in the area. Having said that, I do know main rivers you can step across, and non-main rivers you'd need a rowing boat to get across. So, but generally speaking, they are the more major watercourses in the area. And in this sort of low-lying area, it tends to be the sort of the higher level carriers as the water's carried from the higher levels, from the upland catchments through to the outfalls at the sea. So in the case of Boston, we have the Maud Foster drain, got the River Witham, and the South 40-foot drain are the main watercourses that we manage here, as well as the tidal river coming from the Wash. So my teams that I have under me generally look at the future plans. We put together investment proposals for the future. We also carry out quite a few of the investigation after flooding, with a view to seeing if they can be integrated into future plans. Part of those investigations also feed into the flood maps that we produce. If you go online, you'll see the flood maps that often people use to see if their homes are at risk from flooding, and I would encourage anybody to do that. We've actually just updated those maps last year, so I would encourage people to look at those maps. We're also a statutory consultee in the planning process, so we comment on the larger sort of planning applications with regards to flood risk. One of the key things that we do as well is we work with other risk management authorities. So we manage the government's what we call government grant in aid from DEFRA. So this is the money that risk management authorities such as the IDBs and the county council can apply for to produce flood schemes. So for some of the IDB board schemes might be a refurbishment of a pumping station. For the county council, it might be a surface water scheme. And we also apply into the same scheme for work such as that's happening at the Grand Sluice at the moment, so the refurbishment there and the Boston Barrier and things like that. So we've got quite a successful record of attracting funding towards Boston for schemes such as that. The other thing that we do is we operate the flood warning system. So we have teams that manage that system on a day-to-day basis. When we get flooding, they do sort of validation of what's happened, see if those flood warnings were effective. Did what happened? what happened largely meet our expectations or forecasts, and if not, adjust those flood warnings to suit. That probably brings me on to the recommendations of the section 19, and I think it was the fourth recommendation was a review of the flood warning service downstream reaches of the south 40-foot drain. So when the flooding happened last year, we didn't actually have a flood warning service in that location, which was why this recommendation was put in place. So since the flooding last year, we've actually created a flood warning area, a bespoke flood warning area for that for those communities. We've got a total of 154 properties in it, and it went live in July last year. So there's a fair amount of sort of technical work that goes into setting up a flood warning area. You need to have sort of trigger levels for that. We need to make sure those trigger levels are set at the right level. One of the key things about managing a flood warning system is that we try and avoid the cry wolf scenario, so that if we issue too many flood warnings without there being any consequences, as it were, people may not react when it actually happens. So we spend quite a bit of time trying to get those trigger levels correct. And obviously when there is flooding and we've issued a flood warning, we go back and review that to see if we can refine those trigger levels anymore. So so that was the that recommendation which we've completed. The other recommendation, or I'd take sort of these two together. One was the review of the modelling for the south 40-foot drain, and the review of the EA and sort of Black Sluice IDB assets during heavy rainfall events. So what we've done since the flooding last year is that we've gone back to the modelling. So when we carried out the decommissioning of the Black Sluice pumping station, the information that we based that on was based on some computer modelling that we did in 2016, which gave us some information which helped us to inform that decision at the time. So after the flooding last year, we decided to review that modelling to see if those assumptions were right, or see if those outcomes from that modelling were correct. Broadly, those assumptions we found either did match what we found in 2016. The consultants that we hired to carry out that modelling, Mott McDonald's, found no major concerns with the 2016 modelling. And the findings of the updated modelling were in alignment with the modelling from 10 years ago. We did put in the catchment conditions, obviously. So at the time last year, we had very sort of frozen ground in January 2025. So we found that the most significant factor which increased the levels in the south 40-foot were those sort of catchment conditions. So when the rain sort of falls onto highly sort of frozen and saturated soils, it runs off very, very rapidly. We did find that again, in line with the conclusions of the 2016 assessment, that the pumping station would lower levels locally in the vicinity of the pumping station, and again, that was in line with what we found in 2016. The reduction in levels would not in themselves be enough to cause prevent the flooding. So were the factors built onto that, such as the frozen ground, contributed to the levels we saw at the lower end there. Going forward, there's still a little bit more work we need to do with the modelling. We think there are probably things we can do to maybe refine the situation, such as working with our colleagues at the IDB, looking at modernising the management of the catchment. So that there are future things we can look at. Again, probably not enough to lower the levels completely to prevent situation like we had previously, but at least to look at ways in which we can reduce the risks of this sort of flooding happening again. I'll go on to the next item, which was wall raising at the lower points of the south 40-foot drain. So yeah, the modelling did show that a combination of factors, and I think the one thing that we've sort of discovered since is the walls or the flood defences in the sort of the Wibberton Road area have suffered from some subsidence over the years. So one of the things that we're doing is that we've managed to secure some funding for this year, 2026-27, to do some investigation works into the flood defences in Boston. And this could include measures such as addressing seepage and settlement of those defences, as well as other defences within the town as well. So another thing we might look at is the refurbishment of the Maud Foster sluice outfall. So we've managed to get some money to do some preliminary investigations into some of those sort of what we might call fluvial flood defences. So we've got money this year to investigate. It's no guarantee of allocation in future years, but we will certainly be putting a bid forward going forward. I think I'll leave it there. I'm conscious sort of time's pressing on. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, so I'm happy to take those in due course.
I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour back to about 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we had an emergency plan. It's suggested that our current emergency plan is reviewed in light of this flooding. 5 years ago, our emergency plan consisted of, if the water got to a certain level down near Pinchbeck, then we would go and turn our pumping stations off, and we wouldn't turn them back on until they reached the highest known levels within those catchments, effectively holding the water within the individual catchments rather than putting the water into the South 40-foot. Black Sluice have 25 pumping stations that pump either directly into the South 40-foot or via one of the tributaries. So we put, or can put, up to 60 cumecs, that's 60,000 litres per second into the South 40-foot drain. And there's also 7 what we call highland carriers, because anything above 5 metres above sea level towards is a highland, that are Environment Agency main river drains. So 5 years ago, to turn off a pumping station, bearing in mind there's 25 of them, the workforce had to literally drive from one to another and literally switch the switch off. So after the 2012 events and various events that we've had recently, we upgraded our telemetry system to be able to control our pumping stations remotely and set levels within our pumping stations. This was post the modelling that Morgan spoke about. And what this meant is we can now set an emergency profile level. So instead of the workman taking 6 hours to drive around all the pumping stations and switch them all off, at the push of a button on a computer, I can switch them all off in about 10 minutes. What we actually do now is we set it to an emergency profile level. So instead of just switching them off and then switching them back on again, we'll set an emergency profile level and we'll start to hold the water back within the Black Sluice drains. So we're not putting all that extra pressure on the South 40-foot drain, because the Highland carriers have no means of stopping the water going into the South 40-foot drain. And it's in nobody's interest to overwhelm the South 40-foot drain, because we've seen it overtop, and it could be more catastrophic of that if it was overtopping and could cause a breach. And then where that breach would be, there'd be a lot of water over a long distance because of the geography of the area. We've also just upgraded the telemetry system again on the back of the IDB fund, and we've now gone from a radio system, which was very precarious when there's weather, and generally when we want to switch pumping stations off, there is weather. and we've gone on to a 4G, 5G system with the radio as a backup. So we're forever trying to find ways to upgrade our systems. We review our emergency plan regularly, so I think it's on a 3-year cycle of being reviewed. But we also review it after every flood event or every incident, and it was reviewed following the January 2025 flooding in March 2025. I've been speaking with Morgan over the past week about this modelling check and simulations and such like. And one thing we have been discussing is the possibility of linking our systems so that the pumping stations closer to Boston might stop pumping when the water gets to a certain level and it's tide locked. And then as the gates open, those pumping stations can kick back in and get rid of the water. That's going to be a fine balancing act and something that will take time to refine and try and make it work to the best it possibly can. But with the new technology, that's the sort of things we can do and what we're looking to do now to try and minimise that risk to not just Boston, but the whole of the catchments in the South 40-foot drain system.
Thank you, Matthew, Morgan and Daniel. I'll just pass to Kim and to Steve to see whether they wanted to add anything. Thanks, Kim. I know you've had a problem getting here this evening. I'm pleased to see that you're here safe and well. So yeah, I'll hand over to you two, and you can perhaps explain a little bit about what your role is for the public that are here and for members, and then address any specific points you feel would be useful.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Pickett. I'm the Community Resilience Officer for Lincolnshire. My job's been funded by DEFRA funding, as flooding is, as we've heard, one of the biggest issues for the county. And I'm essentially here to support the residents and the communities to be able to prepare for, respond to and recover from all hazards, including flooding. And it's those things that we can have control over in terms of preparing on a household level and supporting our neighbours. And it's things that I'm here to support on that journey. So one thing that I'm doing across the county, and I'm just sharing on the screen a bit about what community resilience is essentially we've seen communities come together and support each other in those times of need when the unexpected things happen. Essentially we've seen it during COVID-19 when we saw neighbours helping neighbours, whether that was delivering food parcels or medication, checking in on somebody who they know in their communities may be a bit more vulnerable, or helping them, say, for times of flooding, maybe moving their things to higher ground or putting flood barriers in place if they need that extra assistance. And this is something that communities can take into their own to take back some sort of control over things that we don't necessarily have control over. My role is about supporting the communities and the people of Lincolnshire every step of the way in terms of writing a community emergency plan on how to respond to all of these hazards, and how to kind of drum up volunteers and know in their community, using their local knowledge, where they can use as places of safety if you needed to leave your homes and open up a place where they could go for safety, put the kettle on, have a cup of tea and have that familiar person, face, smile, supporting them and having that shared experience whilst they go through that together and get the support of the emergency services. It's not about replacing the emergency services. It's about freeing them up to focus on their job at hand, where the communities can support themselves and come into their own role. I've got a little example on the screen of when a community emergency response team's been able to step up and help their community. And I specifically used an example that's not flooding related. This was our community group in Wainfleet, who we got a phone call from the local police saying that they have had to put a cordon in place and evacuate their homes within a 100-metre cordon because they found potential firearms and things in a property. We were able to contact our community emergency response team there in that location and ask them to open up their place of safety, Coronation Hall, outside of that cordoned area. They were able to do that in 15 minutes. it took myself and my colleagues 90 minutes to get across county to get to that location. So in that time between us getting there, the community were already supported and they were already had the doors open, welcomed in, and we're getting information fed into them and feeding information into us. So it's about keeping that communication free flowing between the team of volunteers, the community, and feeding it into us in the emergency planning team so we can help and coordinate that response and support the communities. As I said earlier, it's all about how we can plan for, respond to, and recover from all hazards. And sometimes it's those unexpected things. I'm sure we all heard about the suspected bomb. It can take us by surprise, and sometimes it's those things that we just don't foresee coming. And this is where communities really come into their own and can support each other, because you've got that local knowledge. You know your communities better than I do. And so really, I'm here today to answer any questions if you've got any, share information on it, and I can support your communities in that journey of how to write a plan and come back and talk about that at a later time, because I know that I'm short on time here today. I would like to say it's not all take, because I know it's a lot to ask communities to give up their time and volunteer to support each other. And we offer quite a lot to give in return to those who want to volunteer. So as I said, I'm here to support you throughout the lifetime, throughout that journey, whether it's getting going or you've been and you've got a plan for a year in place and you want to kind of strengthen your resilience. I'm there to support, and so is the emergency planning team. We will also provide communities, each community emergency response team in each parish or town boundaried area, a community emergency kit. This is a basic kit. It's about the equivalent cost of about £300 in the kit of things like gloves, torches, walkie-talkies. Again, communication is really key, so how you can keep in contact with each other, basic first aid kit. It's a whole plethora of tools that you can use in those times of emergency to just get going and start helping and support your community. One thing that I think is really crucial in this is we provide a 24-hour duty emergency planning duty officer contact number to the community volunteers that work with us. That means Boxing Day, Christmas Day, 3 o'clock in the morning, something's happening in your community, you can pick up the phone and speak to the emergency planning duty officer and let us know what's happening on the ground. If we don't know, we can't help. And it's also, we can help advise and tell you what we want you to be doing. So you're not on your own at any point if something's happening. Finally, indemnity insurance is a really big thing. A lot of the community groups I work with, they get so far down the line, they've got their volunteers, they've written the plan, and somebody asks, what about indemnity insurance? We will cover those community emergency response teams who work with us, go on this journey and go through the stages with us, as long as they're within the scope of what we're asking them to do and not going out of that scope, which means don't put yourselves in danger, don't add to the risk. So we don't want anyone being a Rambo. I say this a lot. No running into burning buildings, no wading into floodwaters. Keep yourself safe, because otherwise you will hinder the support of the blue light services, because they'll have to probably help you and save you. And then we offer free training, whether that's door knocking, rest centre registration. We offer that free training to support our community volunteers to grow in knowledge, grow in confidence, and be able to support their communities. I do newsletters, so please check out the Lincolnshire Resilience forum website, where you can get more information on what community resilience is, what other communities are doing, and how to get involved. And we are also in the process of organising a community resilience conference, which is open to our volunteers. People who are interested in community resilience, are ready for anything volunteers, and it's going to be in October. So keep your eyes peeled, because we'll start promoting that and opening it up for anyone who wants to come along and find out more. I've gone through that really quickly, so hopefully you've followed me, and I'm here if anyone wants to ask me any questions in a moment. Thank you.
Just one thing from me, sorry, ladies and gents and councillors. Steve Easton Harrison, Emergency Planning Officer. I support Boston Borough Council with their emergency plans as well. This programme is part of that recommendation number 2, so encouraging those communities to come together to have mitigation plans in place. And we're going a step further by looking at resilient community hubs. So we're looking at rest centres that are able to withstand power loss, communication loss as well. And we're looking to equip them with modern technology to be able to cope with those sort of situations. But it all ties in again with the partnerships emergency plans, which we've just updated to make sure that we've covered all of those different areas. So it's not just this a case of there's several different organisations here. We all tie in together and we make sure that everything that we're doing is linked and it's systemic to the end result, which is to protect the community. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now open the meeting for comments and questions. Councillor Scoot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morgan, you said you've applied for grant funding to investigate. I have a report in front of me, which I've read thoroughly, and I appreciate this was a 1 in 1,000 year event, but it's given me reasons why. So why are we doing more investigations? Why aren't we just getting on with repairing stuff?
So firstly, it's not just for the Wimbledon Road area. We're looking at all the sort of the fluvial flood defences or a number of fluvial flood defences in Boston. So we're looking at the Maud Foster as well. But one thing we do know about the flood wall, we do know that it has subsided. We do know that the joints need some attention. So yeah, we want to investigate it to see if there's anything that we can do that might improve the situation a little bit more. So we looking at that over the next year or so.
To come back, okay. Councillor Alison Austin.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. Obviously, I don't want to concentrate on the one event that was, say, if you like, the major one as far as my area, my St Thomas's ward, and the residents therein. I first of all, I've got written one or two things down. You were talking, whilst I remember, about events put on by Shine. Where are people like us going to learn about them? Certainly those of us who don't really use social media. So please, where do we source information about them?
May I take this one to answer? So I mentioned in my presentation earlier that I've been doing a newsletter quarterly. I've been working really closely with Shine in organising these these roadshows with Shine, and I've been promoting it in the newsletter, which get emailed out to every single parish council and town council that I have an email address to. And my ask of the parish councils is then to share it with their community in the channels that they use, because it helps cascade that. So I have been trying to use as many channels as possible and asking the local communities to help cascade that as well.
Right, thank you. Of course, my little bit of Boston is the one that hasn't got a parish council, but it's BTAC. So until there is a town council or some other form of collective communication, I think then BTAC must be treated as such and added to Shine's list. Now, can I go on with one or two other points that really, because I think we've almost got to put the flooding incident to bed, but I've got some comments that I want recording. And first of all, 2 or 3 things that I would like minuted, if I could please, because first of all, I wanted thanks to the then leader of the council, which was Councillor Dorian, for sourcing immediate emergency funding for some of the affected residents, and which also I think included some residents, some families being put up for a night at the travel lodge nearby. So, you know, these sort of acts made obviously quite a big difference. a lot of residents some had family nearby, but interestingly, there were many who didn't want to leave their properties because obviously they needed, their possessions to be looked after. So these were things that we perhaps didn't think about at the time. Now, other things that I've got on this very hit and miss list, I needed to thank one councillor who's not here on this committee, that's Councillor James Cantwell, because he assisted me on that day. We had to go around all the residents we could find and record, check them, and where would they be spending the night. Simple as that. And help like that, I'm very, very grateful to that young man who helped me with that. Now, I've got so much else here. I think I better let other people now get a look in.
Excuse me, I think Councillor Austin just wants to have a word.
Thank you.
I think we're all concerned about global warming and rising sea levels, and of course the outfall of the South 40 foot is a key issue in this conversation and investigation. Now, I know there's, because of the finances, there's little enthusiasm for restoring the pumping arrangements at the Black Sluice. But has any thought been given to adding another sluice into the haven to give even more capacity for outfalling when the tide allows? That's my first question.
I'll take that one. So yeah, first of all, yeah, I completely agree. Climate change will mean more of these sort of events. We can't rule out ever having one of these again. Sea level rise also means that the time sort of like gravity outfall is reducing, so that the lower tides are getting higher, if you see what I mean. So yeah, it is a challenge going forward. I don't believe we've looked at specifically the addition of another sluice, although some works were done a number of years ago around the outfall to increase the capacity, the gravitational capacity, if you like, of the outfall. So that's so re-engineering the lock to allow for sort of that gravitational outfall. And so you've basically got the two channels there. So I don't think it's something we'll be pursuing going forward. If we can, we do have a good history of attracting quite a bit of funding to Boston, where we can make the business case sort of stack up. So obviously with the barrier, with the Grand Sluice works that are going on at the moment, the Lower Witham works with IDBs. We're working with Witham Forth IDB at the moment to look at replacing the Hobhole pumping station. So where we've got a really good business case and we can make things like that stack up, we'll most certainly try and attract the funding. But I don't think we would have the necessary would be able to make the necessary business case to be able to build another outfall alongside what's existing there at the moment.
Continue.
Another question. The one very disappointing aspect of the investigation is that it identified that the wall where the overtopping occurred was a serious area of risk. In fact, there was some serious cracking in that wall, and that was discovered in June, identified in June, 6 months before the flood. Why wasn't something done immediately to solve that issue or improve the issue? It's very disappointing that nothing had happened when the 6th of January occurred.
Who would like to?
I'll take that one again. Yes, so you were right. Yeah, we did have an inspection prior to the winter. Our planning cycle for putting projects on future programmes sort of runs on a sort of cyclical basis. So the project was put on a bid for funding. The planning cycle runs from so we didn't meet the timings to put that scheme on the bid list, if you like, for that year. We did put it on for the following year, and actually some money was spent on the wall last year to sort of fill some of those cracks, but it just didn't meet the timescales for the planning cycle. As you can imagine, we've got many thousands of flood risk assets across the area. We have to put those into a process of prioritisation and planning. When it was discovered, it did go through that process of assessing it, triaging it, putting it on a plan, and it went on the plan, and some work was done the following year.
Any more questions? Councillor Izzard.
Thank you, Chair. If I'd like to start with Matthew first. So basically, you confirmed to this committee that although you may do a report with recommendations, you cannot enforce those recommendations. Is that correct?
It is, yes. Under the Flood and Water Management Act, it gives us no powers to compel organisations to carry out work. Okay. And that can include, I mean, including Lincolnshire County Council ourselves in that, because obviously we are a risk management authority. The Highways Department, for example, will have highways drainage assets, and often that gets flagged doing Section 19 investigations and things like that. So this isn't just about other organisations. I'm including, Lincolnshire County Council, but under the Act, no, there are no powers given to us to compel organisations to carry out work.
Okay. Do you feel though, and you admitted in your own slides, was it over 1,000 incidents that had to be looked at, and a Section 19 may be brought in, that's a weak area, that there could be a number of rises because your recommendations can't be enforced? So these incidents can continue to rise across Lincolnshire.
So we work to the Act, which is obviously legislation, and I think it's fair to say that it's considered that is probably weaker than it could be, but that would require legislative change and policy change, which isn't in our gift at the moment. But what we do have locally, and why we chose to go down the route of making recommendations, which, as I said, isn't actually a requirement of Section 19 of the Act. This is something additional we've agreed to do at a local level. Not all authorities do this. Is that we have a strong flood and water partnership in Lincolnshire, of which all risk management authorities are members. So ourselves, IDBs, Environment Agency, Resilience Forum, and the water companies. And whilst it doesn't necessarily mean that actions could be taken forward, because each of those organisations will have their own budget constraints, resource constraints, and everything else, and their own programmes of work that they work to, what it does mean is that we can have those collective conversations, so that we can then effectively report back into committees or publicly what those discussions are that are happening, which ordinarily wouldn't necessarily get reported if we were to just work to the Act, which says we have to identify the causation and if organisations had fulfilled their responsibilities. So this is something locally where we've tried to be more open and transparent to what those discussions are that are happening. But of course, it still comes down to constraints of individual organisations as to what may or may not be able to be taken forward. But we can make that publicly available through our website, so it's more open and transparent than what it would be normally.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And just the last question to you was, you say that 9 out of 40 took forward the grant proposals. Well, there's 2 questions really. Was it means tested before they could apply for the grant? And 2, how long did they have to apply, and could they still apply currently today?
The applications are now closed just because of the time frame that we have for spending the money, but we have been open to people coming and joining the scheme right up to the last minute, and that hasn't, not in Boston, but I think in other areas where they've not responded to the initial our initial contact to try and invite them onto the scheme. But we've been open to anybody who has been willing to do that, because ultimately we're wanting to help people as best we can, or get on that road to recovery and be better protected in the future. With the grant that we operated by Lincolnshire County Council ourselves, with the £1 million that was made available from the last administration, we directly contacted individuals who had been internally flooded to make them aware and work with them directly through the processes if they so wish to do so and take the offer of the grant. The DEFRA grant, the government grant that we had administered prior to that for Storm Babette and Storm Henk, was a little bit more complex. They had to apply themselves, and it was a bit more of a complex process because we were working to the government guidelines. But this one, we tried to keep it as simple as possible for people, and we work with them directly to do that. But ultimately, if people choose not to put measures on their home, we can't force them to, because ultimately it's their home. We can only be there to guide, advise and try and help them wherever we can, but ultimately we can't force people to do something to their own home. So I have to say it's a little disappointing that it's such a low take up, because these are measures that could probably assist people, but we fully respect that if people don't wish to take that up, that's their choice.
Okay, and just to confirm, it was no way means tested.
No.
You didn't have to live in a council property.
Open to all. It was open to those who had been affected by internal flooding to their homes by whichever property it was, or there was no restriction. It was directly contacting those people who've been affected.
Thank you very much. I'll now move on to you, Morgan, if I may. You say that you had flooding maps in existence and you've updated some of those, but you also mentioned that there was no flood warnings in the area that was flooded at the time. Did your map show that area as possible flooding prior to the flooding? And then why wasn't there a warning in place?
Yeah, so the flood maps that were in existence showed the whole floodplain, including the tidal floodplain. So the tidal floodplain for Boston is quite extensive. It covers a large part of Boston. It shows what would be flooded if things like the tidal defences weren't there and the Boston barrier. There was actually a flood warning in place for all that area, but from a tidal flooding perspective. What wasn't in place was a flood warning for a fluvial flooding. So for rainfall in the wider catchment area. So it was something which hadn't been deemed necessary to put in place before January last year, but obviously with the flooding that occurred, it's something we looked into afterwards, and we were able to put in place the flood warning area by July. What I would say, which I neglected to say before, I would encourage your constituents to sign up to flood warnings where they're able to. I mean, they're free. People are able to go on to our website or the .gov website, or they can ring the flood line, which will give them information to be able to do that over the phone. So these are flood warnings where you get through various different methods, both on sort of your phones, emails, phone calls as well, text messages, that sort of thing. But I would encourage people to investigate and sign up to that, because it can help with people's individual resilience.
Okay, so you say that there was an oversight in this particular area. Have you remapped to look at other areas that may well be overlooked at the moment that could potentially flood? Without the tidal flood?
We're constantly updating our flood warning areas. So, for example, along the Lower Witham, we've looked at that. We looked at that, and what we find there is the flood warnings that we issued previously covered a very sort of wide area. So one of the things we've done is sort of break that down into more sort of manageable chunks, so it's more reflective of what might occur if flooding happened in some of that lowland system. For example, if you had a breach in one location, it's probably unlikely that it would impact on other areas which were previously covered by a much larger flood warning. So we're able to be a lot more prescriptive in defining areas and what might realistically flood. But it's under constant evolution, the flood warning system all over the country. So we've concentrated over the past few years on some sort of smaller communities as well.
Okay.
I would say as well, while we're talking about flood warning, the gauges that the county council will put in will, as Matthew said, will not be part of the Environment Agency's flood warning system, but may help to inform communities of high river levels.
Okay, thank you for that. One more. You say that there was a report done in 2016 regarding the Black Sluice, etc., etc. Who did the report in 2016? And was it the same company that's just carried out the most recent report? Because you said that there was hardly any changes that needed to be rectified. So did you use the same company for both reports?
To be honest, I'm not sure, so I'll have to come back to you on that one. But Mott McDonald's were the consultants we used for the review of the modelling that was carried out in 2016. But I'll have to consult with colleagues and come back to you on that one.
Okay, thank you for that. And that you're now off the hook. Daniel, I've got no questions for you. And Kim, just one. So how many local plans have we got in the Boston area currently?
Oh, excellent question. I'm not sure I can answer it off the top of my head. I've got a spreadsheet that fills it out, but earlier I heard James Cantwell's name mentioned. I'm working really closely with him, and I have regular meetings because he's supporting, I think, at least 5 villages in his local area to go on this journey, fill out a plan, and we're working through those stages at a pace that suits him. So you are working through that, and I've been to Boston previously to run a session introducing the community to what community resilience is and how to write a plan, and that was held near the Boston Stump itself. Continuously trying to grow that, but off the top of my head I don't know. I could tell you the figures because I looked at it recently for the whole county of completed plans that have gone on that journey, and that's 56 for the county, but we've got another 101 communities that have agreed to go on this journey with us, and they're at various stages, whether that's starting out or in draft format, or waiting to do tabletop exercises with myself. So there's a hell of a lot of work going on in the background, and it takes a long time, and it's not one size fits all for a community group. I try and approach it by listening to the community, listening to their needs, and hearing what they want and what their journey, their vision for the journey is, so that we can support them to make a really strong community resilience plan for them and their community specifically. One thing, whilst I've got the microphone, I forgot to mention is the telemetry devices that have been fitted across the county for communities as that early warning alarm system. I'm working very closely with the team that are doing that. We're linking them in as a trigger point for the community emergency response teams to use to do that warning inform into the community that the water levels might be rising, and start putting things in place to activate and prepare for the floodwater rising in a timely manner so that it can help and support their community. So a lot of the work that's happening across this partnership is very much interlinked, and we are always sharing best practice and lessons learned so that we can support the communities of Lincolnshire as best we can.
Okay, keep your mic on.
Okay.
Because following up from that, how many numbers in your team, and where does your funding come from?
Numbers in my team for the Community Resilience Project,
across Lincolnshire.
It is me.
Right.
across Lincolnshire. However, I'm very much supported by the emergency planning team, like my colleague Steve, who helped me push this programme across the county. What was the second question?
Just where does the funding come from this important work?
My job role has been funded by DEFRA funding via the groundwater project. It's part of, I'll read it off of the bottom of this leaflet. The project is funded by DEFRA as part of the 200 million flood and coastal innovation programs, which is managed by the Environment Agency.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just come in on that?
Of course you can, Steve.
Yeah, so part of Kim's project is a 2-year project that we hope will go beyond 2 years, because we realise that community resilience isn't going to be fixed in those 2 year time frame. What Kim's been able to do in the 11 months that you've been here, it's been astronomical. There's around about 10 parishes associated with Boston Borough that we're working with, and countless amounts in South Holland and East Lindsey. What's disappointing for us is we are really struggling to get that buy-in within the town itself. So our ask to you really is please encourage the communities that work within Boston, come and talk to us, and we're more than happy to support.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Izzard. You can stand down now. Councillor Drayton, thank you.
Yes, you've got me on board, right? I'll help you in any way I can. I think it's marvellous, right? My kind of gig, so yeah. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Alison Austin.
Something that I think Andy, Councillor Izzard, asked about, and I think it was aimed at Morgan, and I think sort of, was this the sort of document that you were possibly thinking of in answer to his question? But trouble is, I've forgotten what his question was. Yes, yeah, yes, that was the consultant. It's this GeoSmart or yes.
Yeah, I think I found the answer to it. The 2016 Black Street work, I thought it was a report done by Mott McDonald.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? Would any members of the public like to address the panel? Thank you. Amanda, could you assist? Thank you very much.
Can you hear me at the back, at the front? Sorry.
Yeah, please state your name and your interest. Thank you.
Yeah, Andy Robinson. I'm a resident of Wibberton West Road since 1997. My property was flooded. Also in the next door property, it's a little buy to let. Owned that for about 15 years. I'm not a big time landlord or investor. It was just to make my garden a little bit bigger, and then rent the house out. So that's my interest. Where to start? It's just to give you guys a little bit of context in terms of what we've gone through for the last 18 months. There's some of my neighbours here from a flood action group that we've set up. It's a very informal flood action group. We're just very active on WhatsApp, and we keep in touch virtually. We've not had any meetings as such yet. We're in our early days, but we just want to see some action done about this situation, because guys, it's not acceptable. I don't know if you've been through a flooding event, but it's a pretty horrific experience, and I certainly don't want to go through it again. So I was aware that there was going to be a Section 19. I was told by Anne Dorian in February. We had a number of conversations that she was pushing for Lincs County Council to lead that. We had some communication from Links County Council looking for feedback, which we provided, me and my wife. Then it went really quiet. So I engaged with Councillor Austin from about July onwards, and we went backwards and forwards all the way through to December, getting really frustrated that we'd not seen the Section 19 report. Now, I'm assuming that as a resident and a flood victim, I'm entitled to see that because I'm, I want to get on board with this, and I see this as something that everyone in this room can work on to improve for the future, because this isn't going away with climate change and what's going on in the world. So I'd like to praise Councillor Cantwell, because he did manage to get me a copy of this Section 19 report, which was really informative. So one of the first things that we did when we had the WhatsApp group was make sure that everybody in Witham West Road and Park Road got a copy of that, because there's a lot of residents that haven't seen the reports from the Environment Agency. It was through Anne that I got to see some of the content from the Black Sluice meetings in February, which was really helpful and quite reassuring. So I think there is a failing in terms of communicating and cascading information out to local residents. We've got a church hole at the end of the street that would be ideal for a residents' meeting. We've got WhatsApp, we've got Facebook, there's no excuses not to stay joined up. And I'd like to point out that is not aimed at Alison in any way, shape or form. I think it's a council responsibility to keep your constituents better informed. So I'd like to thank Councillor Austin for putting this meeting on my radar. I've shared it with the group. Unfortunately, life goes on and we've all got stuff going on, so we've not had many of us that can get down tonight. But we did a letter, which I'm quite happy to share, and some of you would have seen this, just positioning things really in March in terms of where we were. So I'll keep it brief because I know time's pressing, but so obviously we've got the frustration off the back about the lack of awareness of the 19 report, which, tonight's been really beneficial. Credit to Boston Borough Council, because, your support in the immediate aftermath was second to none. We had people knocking on the door, we had the skips, we had the financial assistance that was mentioned earlier. That was really welcome and reassuring, and everybody's hands to the pump in the first few days after a serious event like a flood. But then when those skips have gone, there's that air of everything's gone back to normal. That's not the case for myself, for my neighbours here, and for 30 other property owners. We have gone through an absolute nightmare. So just to be clear, what our flood action group would like to see, and I've learned tonight that, there's a chance that these recommendations won't even happen. But we want to push for them to be scrutinised and, lobby for their implementation. I'll come on to the wall in a minute because that seems really obvious for me. The other thing, maybe use this situation as an example as learning for elsewhere in Boston Borough Council. We'd like to see a forum established that keeps all the residents informed on what's going on. Because we're quite happy to work with organisations to make things better for the future. So I think it was Matthew. Yeah, so appreciate the update on the the property flood resilience scheme. Now I got 2 emails about that, and I'll just read out to you what I put in the letter to Alison about that. Recommendation 1 from the Section 19 report, resistance and resilience measures, noted that LCC contacted residents twice regarding the process of applying for support. Our view is the process was complex, lacked empathy and was time consuming. It didn't consider the other challenges residents were preoccupied with last year that took priority. So I'm sorry if that's a bit blunt, but it was not a friendly process, not easy to deal with. Personally, I had 2 houses to dry out that in one case took months to get it dried out. Then we had to organise tradespeople, get 2 or 3 quotes in, go through our insurance process. So that was the whole of last year taken up. in between all of that, life has gone on. There's been life events. There's been work to get back to. I took 2 weeks off work in the immediate aftermath of the flood, so I owed a bit back to work. So I personally didn't have time to fill out those forms. Now, and I think it could have probably been handled in a better way, and you would get more buy-in. And I've spoken to members of the flood action group, and I think the numbers speak for themselves, that a lot of people feel the same about that. But my tenants don't speak English as a first language, so for them to go through that documentation would just be, it'd be ridiculous. They wouldn't know where to begin. And I personally didn't have the time to look at that for my own property, let alone for their property. We spoke about recommendation 3 about the hydraulic modelling. Obviously, that's something that is close to our heart, and you know we're keen to see what the outcome of that is. The other recommendation that we called out in the letter was number 5 around the review of the operating assets. And we had the situation around the sluice gate at Black Sluice Complex. And as I noted from the minutes of the February meeting that you guys had last year, that I believe that the gearbox was inoperable. It wasn't working automatically, so there may have been a missed opportunity to like hit our maximum discharge capacity. So again, these are things that are a concern to residents. That, you know, is this going to happen again? What's happening to try and make the area safer? And then the last one was recommendation 6 about the raising the 2 wall sections along Wibberton West Road, so they're the same height as the adjacent sections of the embankment on the north side. So my house goes directly onto the back of the south 40 foot, and there is no way that that wall is high enough. We've seen since 2013, since the tidal flood, and bearing in mind we've lived there 30 years. I think you guys said you 40 years. My neighbour's 50 years. You know, we've seen that water, it feels, getting steadily higher and higher since the tidal incident. You know, and I was just amazed when my tenant was ringing me in a bit of a panic that night to say there's water down the driveway, and the wall is literally about that high. So even if the gaps were filled, it's my opinion that that water would have still gone over the top. And the destruction, you know, and the damage is just, until you've seen it, you wouldn't believe it. So yeah, that's probably about it from me. As I say, I've had correspondence with Councillor Austin, and you know we've kind of positioned what we want as a group from the council, from Links County Council, from our local MP. I've contacted the LCC councillor and Richard Tice MP as well. You know, we're not going to be going away. We know that money's in really tight supply, you know, and we're not expecting any special treatment. We're just asking for a bit of communication, you know, and a little bit of hope that we don't go through what we went through in January of this year when the water's high. These guys here are in Cape Verde, and they've seen in the WhatsApp group people start to panic because the water's high. So with my house backing onto the water, I went out and took some photographs and said, guys, I don't think you need to worry. You've all had that flood warning, but it's a general one and not the one that's specific to the area. But that, just wanted to explain to you tonight that that's where we are now. We're walking on eggshells. So yeah, just like to be honest with you guys, and you know, we are fully up for working with the council, with Environment Agency and all the other organisations, if that's going to make, you know, some good come out of a really bad situation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Would you like to respond, Matthew? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to respond, and thank you for those comments. That's really appreciated, actually, because you know, we recognise the impact that flooding has. Just if you see some of those numbers county-wide, you know, that we've been dealing with, and as I said in my presentation, you know, floodwater can recede quite quickly, but the impacts of flooding for individuals lasts, you know, a very long time, and we recognise that. And I've met over the last 3 years a lot of people that have been directly impacted by flooding and seen that firsthand. So I absolutely sympathise. At one of the storm events where I lived at the time, I was very close to being flooded myself, but thankfully it just receded in time. So I recognise the anguish that you go through when these things happen. Regarding the Section 19 investigations, yeah, we recognise that during the sort of 18-month, 2-year period, we were dealing with the consequences of 3 fairly close severe weather events. We were dealing with things on a scale that we'd never dealt with before, where we recognised that communication could have been better, and in an ideal world it would have been rather different. But the numbers again probably speak for themselves, the scale of what we're dealing with at a county level. So not an excuse, just a reality check of what we were dealing with, and in an ideal world that could have been dealt with very, very differently. So there's always lessons to be learned from these experiences. Likewise with the property flood resilience grant, really valuable. Thank you for that honest feedback. I shall take that away, and happy to catch up with you when we're done here as well to talk about that further. When we administered the property flood resilience grant that was put upon us from government after Storm Babette and Henk, that's the first time that we'd administered such a grant. So again, there's a lot of lessons learned to come from that. And we like to think we took some of those lessons learned into the grant that we ran, which was applicable to the Boston applications. Not saying it was perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but perhaps we'd managed to refine elements of it. But just it was still a little complex, to be fair, because we have to follow due diligence of spending public money, and there's certain things that we have to do to go through that. So I recognise, some of the forms had to cover those elements to make sure that, for auditing purposes and everything, we're showing due diligence of correct and proper spend of public money. The team were always available to be contacted and have that chat. I appreciate, again, that's communication, and comes down to that contact. And again, we want to keep refining this process. If property flood resilience measures, and that is going to be something that we continue to take forward and have the ability to, we want to keep refining that process and make it as painless as possible for people, because ultimately this is about helping people get back on their feet and give some element of resilience and confidence moving forward. So it's supposed to be a positive exercise, but I recognise the challenges that there's been. So thank you for the honest feedback. I'll take that away. More than happy to catch up with you afterwards. And my final point that you made, sorry, just to come back, was the recommendations that we've talked about 2 or 3 times now that get mentioned in Section 19 investigations. Just because they are recommendations and we can't compel people to do them, that doesn't mean that they don't get done. It's that honest conversation as to if they do get done, they will get done. But I think it's that honest, transparent conversation again, that if they can't get done, why can't they get done? There'll be a valid reason. We don't just say we're not doing them as organisations. There will be a valid reason, and I think that comes down to the communication element again. As long as that is effectively communicated and you understand, I think that would be helpful, so what we're dealing with. So I think, as demonstrated tonight on the 5 recommendations that were made for the Boston report, you'll see some of those are actually being taken forward or have been taken forward, even though they're only recommendations. So hopefully that does demonstrate that things can be moved forward. So and I think probably just bring Kim in. Just we'd like to engage with you with the flood action group. I think that'll be a key link in for all of us here, that we'd be more than happy to have those conversations. But I'll probably let Kim come in at this point, if that's all right.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. I think both Steve and I was going to say probably something very similar. I literally, while she was talking, just typed a message to Matt saying that I'd be very happy to suggest that I can come and meet your flood action team, work with you, because it's all about not just how we prepare, how we respond, but that recovery. And we really do acknowledge that recovery can take an awful long time. And that mental health and anguish that we go through, and that worry every time that the rain comes down, it is visceral. And I want to be able to help support the communities to be able to navigate that. And again, your honesty and candor about the PFR grant scheme, working closely with my colleagues, I think if we can work together and hear from you and offer that opportunity to learn from what you're saying and what would help benefit. If we can work together collectively to try and implement some of that change, it's a learning process. We're never going to get it right the first time around, but if we can learn from experiences and hear from yourselves, so please, I've written an email address down as leaflet. I'll drop one to you and one to yourself at the end of this so that we can make contact and come out and support. I don't know if there was anything else. Steve, did you want to say anything else?
No, I think you said it admirably. I think the recovery phase, as you pointed out, is by far the greatest period of time with the most anguish. And I think working with yourselves, we can actually help shape the way recovery takes place. And certainly for the linkage resilience form, we have what's known as a recovery framework, and we're gathering this information to make that a more robust document to help responders respond in the way that it puts you first, rather than the agencies, if that makes sense. We're really happy to work with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions from the public? Yes. Thank you. Can you state your name and your interest?
Is this on? Oh yeah. I'm the county councillor for Boston South. So I've got a few points. James Campwell got in contact with me about the grant scheme, where some of the residents weren't being dealt with correctly. I sorted it out. It took quite a while, but got sorted it out. Basically, I think one of them, it wasn't their own language, so, but basically sorted that out. The other thing is, all of you, have any of you contacted me at all about anything? And I'm the county councillor for Boston South.
Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure if I have or haven't. I'd be wrong to say definitively. As the only community resilience officer for the county, I'm constantly emailing multiple people from locations. I think there's 570 areas across the county, but I do touch base with a lot of the elected members and councillors. So I may or may not have, but if I haven't, let's fix that and let's go forward. So let's swap details and see if we can link in.
Yeah. The Webberton Parish Council, I attend every month. We talk over about situations, floods, and Alison Austin has mentioned many things to me, and I've tried to bring that to the fore at the meetings, not only with Webberton, but other parish councils within the area. There is a lack of coordination with people that don't get in contact with me. They go through a system of unable to know which way to turn. I would like to see a little bit of more of coordination from you all for parish councils so that they know exactly what's going on, rather than receiving piecemeal from all of you, if at all. And I dare say, because you've never heard of me, you haven't contacted me, and I haven't contacted you either, only through the and I've got to stress that I work with several borough councillors, all from different persuasions politically, and what I'm more interested in than anything else is the residents. That is my priority. So I will be, after I've got all your contact details, emailing you and asking you many questions that need to be answered. And also, if we've got recommendations to rectify this, why haven't they been done? And if we haven't got the money, why haven't we got the money? And especially the LCC should be looking at no budgetary restraints, actually getting all this fixed.
Would you like to respond? Can we keep this brief, and maybe this ought to be taken outside of this meeting, because this is really for information. I think what you're speaking about needs to be looked at on a wider scale. But Matthew, would you respond in this instance? Thank you.
Indeed, happy to pick up outside the meeting, I think is what I was going to say. But just briefly, some of the, from a Lincolnshire County Council point of view, and the budgets that you mentioned, those recommendations that were identified there are being taken forward by the County Council. So there's no budget constraints from our point of view with the recommendations that sit with ourselves. Obviously, there are recommendations that sit with other organisations, but I think that's sort of been covered in the meeting this evening. Yeah, I mean, I speak with many county councillors on flooding matters. They come to me or my team and contact us, and more than happy to have a conversation with yourself. We haven't spoken yet, I don't believe. But likewise, you know, it will depend on where the focus and the issues are that get raised with ourselves. But if there's things that you wish to raise and discuss with us, we are there to help, support, advise, guide, as always. So I'll pick up make sure we make contact after the meeting.
Wonderful. All I ask is a bit of transparency so that we all know where we're going and how to rectify all these problems within our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you just mind stating your name for the record, please, Councillor?
My name's Barry Robert Andrew Daish, and I'm the County Councillor for Boston South.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any further questions? Oh. Oops, Councillor Alison Austin.
A question probably for Morgan. In years gone by, I've always recommended that people, when there's a potential flood situation, that you listen. Well, I had it, so I was sort of subscribed to Floodline or whatever it's now called. So I would pick up on my phone, home phone, which in fact, what happened 2 or 3 years ago now is was that the first I knew was a phone call saying flooding, but that was unfortunate that when it slipped up a bit, because it said no flooding expected near Boston, and I think you alluded to that earlier. But is that still a good thing to do, to be subscribed to, so that you do get an automatic phone call if in the area that you're interested in, then you get alerted?
Absolutely, yeah. I would really encourage people to sign up to that. Like I say, we're always trying to improve the system, get feedback every time we get a flooding event. But I would certainly recommend everybody to see if there's a flood warning available. Get in touch with us. You can sign up online. As I said, ring the flood line and sign up if you've not got access to the internet. So definitely worth doing. It's there because it helps people be more resilient. There are things you can do on receipt of a flood warning to help to minimise the impacts of flooding. If you marry up signing up to the flood warning with making your own sort of flood plan, which I'm sure Kim would be able to sort of help and advice about things like that. So it's a system which is there primarily for resilience, to improve resilience of communities.
Thank you very much. Just no more questions, everybody? I'd just like to sum up. Thank you very much. You know, I think it's been very interesting and informative, and everybody's had a chance to say what they need to say. I just want to pick up on a couple of points myself. One is one that Councillor Izzard brought up, which was regarding the modelling data. We heard how the weather events, in your words, Daniel, of 23, 24, 25 were quite extreme. It seems to be rather strange to me that when you go back and model from 2016 to 2025, that the modelling is the same, given the extreme events. I just wondered where the software was coming from, and is it updated? You know, I mean, I'm not expecting you to answer everything now. It just seems rather strange to me as a layperson.
So, I mean, I could talk for hours on flood risk modelling, but I won't. Effectively, what the modelling we carried out with over the last year is to kind of verify the modelling that was done in 2016 using the software or similar software that was used then. Essentially, we updated it with the hydrology or the scenario, if you like, that happened last January, and it largely corresponded to what we were expecting based on the original modelling. Going forward, you know, there are much more powerful models that we could use. We're aiming to put sort of updated modelling on our forward modelling programme. We can't say for certain whether we will get the funding to improve on that going forward. But we're at sort of the start of having sort of conversations, as Daniel said, about thinking of perhaps, you know, sort of technological advances, how we can perhaps link up systems with flood warnings and weather forecasts and tidal predictions and things like that. So perhaps using technology to its best ability in the future to optimize the management of the system. So there's potential there to perhaps look at a funding bid for some more sophisticated modelling going forward.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that is a must after listening to all the conversations today. And Kim, just one for you, just before. Just interested, and I don't really expect you to answer tonight, but the low take up, it must be so heartbreaking for you. And I'd be interested in another forum to understand why there is such low take up, because it's not just for the resilience, it's across the board, the low take up from public. And as you're quite close to that, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts as to what we can all do to get people to engage with us more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. To be honest, I wouldn't be able to necessarily answer why there's the low take up. I think it's a misnotion of what community resilience is and what the ask is. And I think collectively we can all hopefully spread the word of how we can get involved in community resilience and let people know what is and what isn't expected. And like I said earlier, we're not expecting you to replace the emergency services. We're not expecting you to put yourselves at risk. Essentially, it's keeping the communication going between yourselves and the residents and us in the emergency planning team, opening up a place of safety. And I go on about putting the kettle on and having a cup of tea, but as soon as something bad goes wrong, I usually go to my mum and dad's house and they say, well, put the kettle on. And it's that sense of normality and comfort in times when things can be otherwise quite distressing. And I think that's where community resilience comes in its own, because it's that well-being, that support, that shared experience. And as we heard earlier, the communities themselves will be there long after the blue light services have gone. And that's really that recovery collectively and how they can tap into that support via us. And if you can go off and spread the word about this and get people to reach out if they're interested and help dispel that misnotion of what it is that we're asking, hopefully we can get a better uptake and hopefully we can support the residents of Lincolnshire grow in their resilience. So thank you.
No, thank you, and fully support your words. Can I hand over to you, Christian? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just like to say thank you to colleagues from risk management authorities that have come today to talk to us about the Section 19 report. I'm really pleased that members of the public are here today, and I hope they will go away from here feeling somewhat reassured from what they've heard this evening. We'll certainly make sure that particularly Kim's contact details are made available to elected members, but also to members of the public. As you've heard eloquently from Kim this evening, she's very willing and able to come and support communities with their flood resilience plans. So it's really just to, in terms of proceedings this evening, there's a recommendation in the report that the committee receive representation from risk management authorities and consider whether they wish to take further steps as a result. So perhaps with that question in mind, I'll hand back to you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I will ask the committee if to take note and comment on this report, and and ask if everyone is happy to take that as noted. Sorry, can't read this. And all comments have been recorded by officers. I would like to thank the guests for taking the time to attend the meeting, and myself, I have a recommendation. In a minute, Councillor Austin. I suggest that you meet back here in 6 months' time, and that we keep this on the work programme and on the agenda, because I think it is an extremely important topic for Boston. I'm sure that I have the full backing of the room. Councillor Austin, did you want to say something? Thank you.
I just wanted to focus attention on the fact that probably as far as the members of the public are concerned, and we councillors are concerned, we want to be kept updated on how far the recommendations are being implemented. And as I said earlier, if something can't be implicated, we want a good reason why that's so.
Exactly. So I think every 6 months, another 6 months, we can take stock of what has been implemented, as you're saying. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, go home now. Yeah, can we put that to the vote, please? Everyone in agreement? Yes, thank you, Councillor Rizzard. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Neil, what's that? That's great. Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for coming tonight, and you're free to go. Thank you. We
just want to close.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, members.
Excuse me. Hold on, we'll have to bang. Excuse me, we're going to have a 5-minute break. Okay.
Alison,
Count-
please.
Councillors, can you take your seats, please? Thank you. Okay. Our second item of business this evening is scrutiny arrangements review, which starts on page 81 of the agenda. This will be presented by Democratic Services Team Leader, Amanda Dickinson. Amanda, would you like to present? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. This report presents the findings of a review of the Council's overview and scrutiny arrangements following the move to a single committee model in May 2025. When full Council agreed that change, members were clear that the arrangements should be kept under review to ensure that they were operating effectively and proportionately in practice. The purpose of this review has therefore been to assess how the current arrangements are working, drawing on practical experience rather than constitutional theory. The review was proportionate and evidence-led. It was based on targeted consultation with members and officers who engaged with scrutiny in different roles, including scrutiny members, cabinet members, group leaders, senior officers and democratic services officers. Respondents were selected specifically because they had experience of both the former two-committee structure and the current single committee model. In total, 21 responses were received. Of those who expressed a preference, 80% supported the continuation of a single overview and scrutiny committee, with 20% preferring a return to a two-committee model. Those supporting the single committee model highlighted improved visibility of scrutiny activity, greater continuity of discussion, clearer work programming, and reduced duplication. From both a member and officer perspective, having a single forum for scrutiny has provided greater clarity about where issues should be considered and has supported more consistent engagement. Some respondents did identify advantages to a two-committee model, particularly around subject focus, but these views were expressed by a smaller number of respondents and did not represent the majority position. The recommendation of this report is therefore worded as follows: that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes and considers the findings of the Scrutiny Arrangements Review. In practice, this means that the committee is not being asked to take a formal decision this evening or to approve any changes. Instead, members are being asked to note the findings of the review and to consider what those findings say about how scrutiny is currently operating, including the practical implications of the options set out at the end of the report. Any potential changes arising from the review would be brought back to members separately where appropriate. I am, of course, happy to answer any questions or clarify any aspects of the review or its findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I will now open the meeting for comments and questions. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. As there's such overwhelming support for one ONS committee, can I propose that we agree that this evening? Can I make the recommendation we propose?
Yes, Councillor Izzard, would you like to speak first? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Amanda. So we look at the respondents. 16 responded and 4 responded against or a preference to 2 committees. Can you break down from the 16 who actually works on this committee, or was it all cabinet, leaders of the council, etc., who don't sit here and have to go through the workload?
Advised that there was strong support from those members that responded, mixed responses from the members, and there were consolidated responses from groups such as
Okay, so by that statement, you're saying that the members that currently sit on this committee did respond to continue with a single committee?
Not all members of this committee responded.
Okay. Which means actually those percentages might go down even further. So I'll go back to 6.2. Cabinet members commented on the clarity provided by a single point of scrutiny engagement, noting predictable timings and clearer interface with decision making. Group leaders' feedback highlighted differing views on representation and participation. again, I kind of feel that it's very nice for cabinet members to comment in this report, but cabinet colleagues are not here having to just go through a very extensive report on flooding that we could have really concentrated a lot more on without other workloads. And I look at the worksheets and some are even greater. I always felt that the decision by the previous leader to go from 2 committees down to 1 was more political than it was for anything else. But that's my statement. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, your last line, Councillor Izard, was literally the first line of mine. Okay, originally, as you know, our group were against this because of the way it was done, primarily, and we boycotted it. Then the changes in the leadership, and we now have a much more open and successful working relationship in all areas. And now when you look and see how this works, you do realize that we were wrong to oppose it. And 6 months down the line, I admit that we were wrong. And I am now fully supportive of this single committee structure and will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pryke.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues who've contributed already. I thought at the time when 2 scrutiny committees got merged into 1, that it was all a bit arbitrary, and like Councillor Evans, I suspected motives that were not being declared at the time. As a member of one of those committees, I had always thought that it was, again, almost arbitrary as to which responsibilities went to which committee, because as members of a smallish authority, we obviously had an overview, a personal overview and a ward overview of all of the issues on both of the committees. And I worried that if everything went into one committee, there wouldn't be enough time to do a proper job. But again, like colleagues, I've reconciled to the current position. And I think the way scrutiny is working now is as good as it can be in our authority. So I also in favour of continuing on the 1 committee model.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers? Okay.
Well, Councillor Austin proposed the recommendation.
Oh, sorry, we forget that.
Um,
Do we propose them?
yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, just had to take a bit of advice. As you've proposed, do we have a seconder? Councillor Evans. Should we move to the vote? All those in favour of remaining the 1 scrutiny committee? All those against? All those abstaining? No one. Thank you very much, Amanda.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll move swiftly on. The third agenda item this evening is the Q3 25-26 performance report, which starts on page 89 of the agenda. This will be presented by the Group Manager, Insights and Transformation, Suzanne Rolfe. Suzanne, would you like to present? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual quarterly performance report as at the 31st of December. It's a summary from page 90 of the key performance indicators, or the KPIs. As the name suggests, these are on the indicators and they don't give us the full story on their own. The purpose of the report is to see if any of these items are of particular interest to you for your work programme. So that's the next item that we look at. There might be areas that you'd like to consider more. The pie chart on page 90 shows that 27 of the KPIs have set targets that we're aiming for, and all are either green, which is on or better than target, or amber, which are within tolerance. There's one waste target, which is an annual target, so that's not reported until the end of the year. The other 65 indicators are trend measures. So these are the ones that don't have a set target, and we're looking at trend over time. So for example, on the building control market share, there's a fluctuation in the market volatility. It's outside of our direct control, so we don't set a target for that, but looking at how that moves over time gives us insight into the service area and how we react to it. So there's those two different types of measures, the targeted ones within our control and the trend measures that give us information. The full details of all of the KPIs are in the appendix, and there's, for those that are amber, there's a commentary there that explains them. One of them's only 0.1% off their target, which I think is very harsh. But the details are all there, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I open the meeting for comments and questions. Councillor Izzard.
Hello. No, but yeah, I mean, going to page 98 of the report tonight. Yeah, the council tax in-year collection rates. We've only achieved the actual target on 2 occasions. Can you kind of break down why we don't have a better achievement to the target that you set?
That's quite a deep question, and I think the commentary gives some of the information around how hard it is to collect some of that information, some of that collection rates, and the difficulties around that. The target is there to ensure that we try as hard as we can to reach it. It is one that it's called a stretch target. So we may not always achieve that, but that might be one of the areas that you'd want to hear more about, the actual work that's being undertaken. There's a little bit in there around the recovery work that they're doing, but yeah, that might be one area of interest.
Thank you very much for that. And this is really from a resident, so just to confirm that on the same page, business rates, in-year collection rates, do we actually collect from properties that are empty? Do they actually have a charge of business rates against them? It's just something I needed to clarify.
I'll get you that information because I know there are different aspects, so I'll find out. And
Thank you
I'll come
very
back
much.
to you with an answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pryke.
This isn't a question about a specific target or a KPI, but I've made the point in the past that when on our performance reports almost every indicator is green, to me that doesn't indicate that, gosh, aren't we doing so well, we're meeting our own targets. It's that our targets are not stretching enough. So could I ask for guidance from the officers as to how we go about changing some of these targets to make them a bit more stretching so that we can aim for something better than we're doing at the moment? Now, I'm not saying we want all business rates collected within a month of the bills going out, for example. But there will be some of these indicators which we're meeting fairly comfortably, and we could aim for better. So how do we go about doing that? Does the initiative have to come from this committee and then go to officers? Or should there be a joint working group to look at what's possible and feasible? I don't know. So some guidance from Christian is probably welcome here.
Thank you, Christian. Oh, Suzanne. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have an annual process which we've just gone through for 26-27, which is reviewing all of the KPIs and their targets. The assistant directors lead that process, but it's also with the portfolio holders. So there's a lot of discussion about the data that we hold, the context around those areas. It is unusual for us to have so many greens at the moment. We've usually got a lot more of a mix, and I'm not sure whether that's to do with stabilising where we've been with the partnership for a while. So things are improving. I don't know the context around it, but we do look at that regularly. We have quarterly meetings. We call it Corporate Governance Clinic, where all of the assistant directors look at the quarterly reporting and can challenge each other and ask those sorts of questions in that supportive kind of a way. And then it goes off to the SLT for them to review as well. So if there were any particular areas that can be raised by officers, but very happy if there is someone here that you are particularly interested in looking at, or at the next quarterly report, it'll be the year end, I can have a look at some of that context data for the year end report and see if there are any that strike me. It hasn't occurred to me before today that there were any out of kilter, and I can raise that if I feel that they are. But now that you've mentioned it, I'll have a really good look at that for the Q4 report and see if there's anything that catches my eye. I can't think of anything, but any member of this committee or and cabinet members as well can raise that at any time for the lead officer to have a look at it. Yeah.
Thank you. Christian?
If I can just add to what Suzanne said, I think I recognise that the comments you made around stability of the partnership is very valid. Also, a lot of the services last year and the previous year have been bringing through significant service reviews. So looking to align services across the partnership, but also to bring focus to areas of work where previously we've been lacking, or where members want that focus to be. So that process has taken quite a long time to sort of re-engineer structures and manage the resources that we have, but redirect them perhaps more effectively and target them more effectively. So I think that's probably on top of the stability that Suzanne mentioned. I think that's probably what we're seeing as well in this data, is that we're in a better shape now to deliver the priorities for members than perhaps we were 12 months ago.
Thank you. Any more? Oh, Councillor Scoot.
Thank you, Chair. One for the future. On the environment on page 97, percentage of household waste collected for recycling and composting. With the advent of the new food waste collections, has it been decided? Will that have a separate line for a KPI, or will that be actually put in with the first line as I mentioned?
I don't think a final decision has been made, because that'll be part of the project work, but I would expect there'll be a lot more data that we'll be collecting and will come through here naturally at the end of the project. But you're right, it'll be more than just that. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? I've just got one myself. Page 95, the occupancy rate at the end of the quarter industrial units. It's consistently doesn't meet target. I just wondered how we market it. Do we market it through an agent? And if so, maybe we should change the agent.
There is going to be an update at the moment, because I think we've talked about this one at a couple of the meetings. So the property team are looking at more of the information around industrial units, and we're putting together a web page so that you'll have all of the information about the current industrial units and how they're marketed and that side of things. That will be before the end of the next quarter. I think we'll be able to share that with you. So there'll be more information to you, but some of that is around the market as well, and it is very difficult at the moment.
Thank you. Well, I will welcome that. Thank you very much. Okay, no vote on this, is there?
No.
So the committee is asked to note and comment on this report. Is everyone happy to take that as noted? Comments have been recorded by officers. Thank you, Suzanne, for attending this meeting. Thank you. The final agenda item this evening is the work programme and forward plan, which starts on page 115 of the agenda. Christian, would you like to present? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The report's there for all to see. Nothing to add, obviously, except that this is the last meeting of the civic year for this committee before the AGM next month. So any areas you wish to bring forward for for consideration by this committee will obviously need to be put before the new arrangements once they've been approved by the AGM. But that was my only comment really this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. I will now open the meeting for comments and questions. Councillor Pryke.
I'd mention on the mention here on page 117 about the task and finish group of the town centre. I unfortunately missed the officers' town centre meeting last week because a fridge freezer was being delivered very inconsiderately, requiring me to be at home. I couldn't get out of it. But I am confident that after some brief discussions with 3 or 4 officers, the report should be available for our next meeting. So it will come to scrutiny first, and then scrutiny decides what to do with it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, Councillor Austin, sorry. Then Councillor Izzard.
In view of the demise of Destination Lincolnshire and the importance of the visitor economy to the area, I do think we should be scrutinising the arrangements going forward as soon as possible.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Austin. Yeah, it's noted on page 1118 of the work programme, isn't it, that it's sitting there pending. So we'll take that work programme forward into the next civic year.
Councillor Izzard.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points. So I think because there's a risk factor on finances, I think I would like to have a little bit more in depth on the council tax collection rates and including that the business rate collection rates going forward. So if that could be included into the work plan, if my colleagues agree, I would like to see that submitted. And the other point, of course, is tonight we agreed for the flood resistance to come back, and that will have to fit in on November 2026 because that's a 6-month thing. So just make sure that both of those get added onto the works plan, if possible, please.
Yeah, agreed. That's a good point. Thank you. Anyone else? I've just got a couple. One is came out of licensing that Councillor Evans and Councillor Izzard and I sat on the other day regarding indelible, if I can say it, labelling on cans sold to premises that are licensed to sell alcohol. We discovered that information is not recorded of these indelible labels. So I would like to propose that we look to why that would be and how we can actually collect that data and use it to our advantage as we have an issue with drinking in the marketplace. Sorry, I'm not making myself very clear, but I think you know what I mean, don't you? And Christian will reword it. Yeah, that's it. Yes, yeah. Sorry, it's been a long night. And it is my birthday as well. I would just like to say that I'm here on my birthday. Thank you very much, Councillor Austin. And the second is regarding public engagement. We hear time after time that the public do not engage with any of our initiatives. We heard today from the resilience team. I'd like to propose that we invite different teams to find out what is the best course of action, get the best learning to actually formulate a plan to improve public engagement. So that's quite a large piece of work, and I'd be very happy for anybody to put forward any organisations that they think we should invite to the scrutiny. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the committee is asked to note and comment on the work programme and the forward plan. Is everyone happy to take that as noted? Comments have been recorded by officers. So that concludes this evening's business. So I will now close the meeting and thank you for your attendance. The next meeting will be on Thursday, 4th of June 2026. Thank you very much.